What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another edition of our Three Things post-game podcast. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me once again from the Spectrum Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here after Carolina's 74-71 loss to Duke in the ACC tournament semifinals earlier tonight. A lot to discuss from this game. Truly a game of two halves, but that doesn't mean we can just come on here and gloss over that first half, AJ. That's where we have to start, and that's what we need to talk about first here because, man, I mean, Carolina falling behind by as many as 24 just look all out of sorts. And it was funny. I was watching the game with my dad, and we kind of looked at each other at one point. I remember we were talking about it a little bit, but it felt like a game in which, especially about, a little over midway through the first half, it felt like Carolina got punched in the face a couple of times and just wobbled its way into halftime because Carolina they looked all out of sorts. And that was one of the worst stretches of basketball I think I've seen Carolina play this season. You probably have to go back to the first Duke game, potentially the Clemson game as well, because Carolina was abysmal in that one as well, to really see just how bad of a stretch Carolina had there. So I know you were right behind the UNC bench. I saw you and Bryant back there a couple times, but what do you make of that first half? And do you agree with that sentiment that it felt like Carolina got hit and just didn't really know how to respond to it?
Yeah, I think they got hit, but I think they were already off balance, so it was easy for them to fall over. And what I mean by that is there was that chaotic sequence where there's reviews and there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's chippiness on the court. Hubert was just pent up. I mean, he was he's always intense, live action, right? But man, it was a different level. And he looked like that. I was watching him before the game, before the tip, and they do the starting lineup, stuff like that. And he takes his glasses off, puts them down, and he just kind of had a look like, okay, like we are like he was on the first boat at Normandy. You know what I mean? And yeah, I don't mean to belittle what happened there. I'm just kind of making a point about intensity and focus. They were walking into something that everything depended on it. Their whole immediate future depended on the next 40 minutes of basketball. And with that, he was screaming at the refs every time Knippel got the ball. Watch the push off. Watch the push off. I tweeted about that because Knippel, he's pretty good at knowing how much to use the forearm when he's dribbling. Sometimes he gets a little too much. And sometimes it's fine. Young player. A lot of guys do that, and you can't call every foul. But Hubert was really uber focused on that and making the officials aware. Like that was the thing. He said, I must say that to the officials every time tonight. So he did. But when things got really testy and chaotic, and there were some sequences the refs had to sort through, and sequences where there's bad basketball because it's physical and it's intense, and both teams brought it right away. And I think Carolina was a little surprised that, man, Duke's really damn good without Cooper Flag. We knew they would be, right? So I think a lot of those things kind of boiled over when I'm trying to think now, there's so much happened in that sequence. I have to go back and look at my notes. But the one where they were going to review something and the players hadn't done anything wrong. I mean, when you're playing a great team, you go back and forth. There's a million mistakes, right? There's also a million good things if you're in a game. Hubert came to the bench and just unloaded on the team.
I think I saw that on TV, actually.
I thought a couple of us on press row were really taken aback by it because that was a moment of composure and uplifting. And I just kind of thought the team was knocked off kilter. I don't think Hubert handled that sequence well because it rattled him, and he's the head coach. And if the head coach is rattled, everybody else is going to be rattled. And so I'm not sitting here saying Hubert's why they lost the game. I'm not going to go that route, but I'm going to say that a coach at North Carolina should not get rattled. Mm-hmm. And he did. So it's another opportunity for him to learn. He's in his fourth year as a head coach. It's an opportunity to learn. It was a very emotional night. I mean, those two teams were going at it, man. They were talking, they were going at it. I think Duke had something to prove because they didn't have Cooper and Malik, but especially Cooper. Carolina obviously had a million things to prove and a million things to achieve. And when they came out a little wobbly and suddenly the team was a little rattled, even though it was a close game, boom, the run started. And they actually did a really good job on Knuppel. He didn't score until there was 9:58 left in the half.
Yep.
It was 14-13, and he hit a three, a wide open three right in front of us. Mm-hmm. And Duke did a nice job there in that stretch of keep running the ball through the middle and getting open looks to Knuppel for threes. When he hit that three, it started the rest of the half. Duke outscored Carolina 31-11. The Tar Heels just bam, bam, bam. And then it looked and felt just like the 33-7 run in Cameron.
Yeah.
The difference is Cooper was on the floor then, and that was in Cameron. This was a neutral site. Cooper wasn't on the floor, and it was 31-11. I would argue that this was worse, especially because of what was online. So it took them till early in the second half to get going. I don't know how much of that was Duke maybe exhaling and relaxing. I would really say that it was probably more Carolina because I saw whatever Hubert told them at halftime and his communication with the team early in the second half, like at the first TV timeout, it's very different. Mm-hmm. So maybe he learned in the middle of the game. Maybe, oh man, I did not handle that well, but it's going so spiraling out of control so much, there wasn't much he could do other than call timeout. And he didn't call timeout. I mean, he channeled his inner Roy like there was no tomorrow today. And he should have called a damn timeout because the best way to stop a run is call timeout. What happened when Carolina got a couple runs going? Shire was calling timeouts. Last Saturday night in Chapel Hill, Carolina starts second half hot. Shire calls a timeout. Mm-hmm. Timeouts are there. Use them. If you're getting run, they're not going to do any good later if you're getting beat by 20 points. Get them now. Stop the run. Reset. Refocus your team. Tell them that what Dean used to tell a team every year. They'd be on the road. The place would be going crazy, like Rummels Coliseum or Old Cole Fieldhouse with a barn that was just loud as can be. And the other team's on a 10-0 run or something like that. And Dean would gather the team and he'd look at them and say, there are a billion Chinese that couldn't care less about this. Mm-hmm. It's not the end of the world. Relax. Play ball. Didn't get that from Hubert tonight, and he needed to do that for his team in the first half. He didn't. Now, we'll talk about the second half here in a minute, but I do think he reversed it in the second half. But that was key. I think you're right. The punches helped, but I think Carolina was who's easier to knock down, a guy standing straight up or a guy who's kind of leaning?
Yeah. Let's talk about the second half because obviously that's when things flipped, and I want to talk in particular about what changed in the second half because this is something else I was discussing with my dad when I was watching the game, where you have to give a ton of credit to North Carolina. I do agree with you where I think Carolina had more responsibility for the comeback than it was Duke just falling apart. But I remember me and my dad were talking about in the second half, and I forgot what point. I think maybe it was when Carolina cut it to like 6 or something like that for the first time. And we kind of looked at each other and said, this is a game where it feels like Duke, as we talk about all the time, human nature, took its foot off the gas pedal. And there was a stretch in the second half where Carolina would cut it close, but Duke would just always hit a shot. And they would hit the shot when they needed the shot, and Carolina would kind of have to come back down and respond, which they did. But it just felt like a game where Duke takes his foot off the gas. Carolina takes advantage of that massively and gets back into the game. And when you're so used to seeing Duke put that foot back on the pedal, people joke all the time that this Duke team feels like it's inevitable just because of how good it's been. But they couldn't put their foot back on the gas. And Carolina just drove straight through it and, again, took major advantage of it, which is why the game became what it came in the second half. So let's talk about the comeback first, because I want to get your take on that before we dive into what happened in the last 4 or so seconds with the Van Allen-Lubin free throw and obviously the lane violation. But what did you make of the comeback? Because I thought it was fantastic, and Carolina deserves a ton of credit for it.
Yeah, I would have things look different on TV than they do up close and personal. And then sometimes when you sit a little bit further away, they look different too. Mm-hmm. My impression up close that Duke didn't take its foot off the pedal. My impression is that Duke went through a long stretch, missed threes for one thing. Duke hit some early threes. And Kneppel came in here, and then the Duke went through a stretch. They missed 13 straight threes, or 12 straight threes. They were 1 for 13 in a stretch, and they were getting a lot of threes. It was kind of weird that for a while they didn't. They should have. If I were Duke, I would have run my offense right through the post every damn time, because they were going to draw fouls and get Lubin out of the game. That should have been the mission. They picked up a real early foul. They should have just gone after him because he was damn good tonight, especially in the second half. But when Carolina, I think what Carolina did was they kept pushing. The disposition I saw from the Tar Heels to start the second half, even when Duke pushed it to 24, 52-28, they didn't have the same disposition and air about them that they did in the first half. They're like, okay, this is the situation we're in. We got to hoop. As RJ would call it, we got to hoop. And they hooped. And they chipped away a little bit. And they got some stops. And Duke continued to miss some shots. I think Duke felt really good about things and didn't really realize how much the Tar Heels were cutting into it because they got enough baskets to sort of hold it off for a while. Carolina was pressing and Duke was going right to the bigs on that. That was a good stretch for Duke. The only baskets they got in a long stretch were either layups right at the rim or those oop dunks to the bigs. Like 5 of 7 baskets in one stretch were dunks. And because they broke Carolina's press. When Duke was in the half court, they struggled. And Carolina's press kind of pushed them into some quick shots. They had some, I don't think they probably want certain guys taking certain shots sometimes. I don't think they want, even though Malawash hit one, like he was channeling his inner Efton Reed out there for a while. That's not a winning formula for Duke.
Yeah.
So I don't think they took their foot off. I just think that they were comfortable and they were playing well and they felt like, okay, this is our groove and we're just going to stay here. But Carolina raised it up and Carolina punched back. Maybe not blows here. They were getting him with the body for a while and eventually the head came over and boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, Carolina has a ball with a chance to take the lead, win the game. So I credit Carolina and Hubert for all the criticism. I levied on Hubert for the first half. I've got to give him props in the second half because he did a really nice job. He should have called a timeout, however, with a minute left, a little bit more than a minute left, because Carolina was down 3, 72-69, trying to get something going for RJ. And RJ was right in front of the bench. And Duke had 2 guys. I mean, they were not going to let RJ get a shot off. And the ball just kind of stagnated on that side of the court. And the whole set structure of the set had broken down. And there was plenty of time on the shot clock, but they tried to dribble and pump fake and whatnot their way out of it. And ended up with Drake missing a 3. It's probably not and it was a well-contested 3 because it was over a long arm. It's probably not the play you want right there. That's when you call a timeout and reset the whole thing. Just call timeout to get him out of that situation, reset, and draw up a screen for RJ if you want him to take a shot and take care of it then. Didn't do it then. That's probably my only criticism of Hubert in the second half, is I really think they should have called a timeout there. It was such a crucial part of the game. Treat it like a last shot situation, because if you don't score there, and they didn't, and Duke goes down the other end and scores, then you're in a really bad situation. Now Duke didn't score. Carolina got it back and cut it to 1. And what happened, obviously. So I think the Tar Heels deserve an absolute ton of credit for coming back. I love the way that Seth Trimble found his game that was missing for 5 halves here in Charlotte. And it found his game. And the fact that this team was in position to win the game when RJ had 8 points. You go back to 17:40 left or whatever it is in the first game. RJ scored 8 points in the last 57 plus minutes against Duke. No threes. And this team was in position to win the game. They didn't get, Ian struggled incredibly. Ian was really poor in the first half, had a terrible half. It's like they don't even rely on him for much right now. And they were still in position to win that game. Jay Witt gave him 2 points, struggled. And they were still in position to win that game. And I know Duke was depleted, but Duke depleted, that we talked about yesterday, still a damn good team. That's still a 1 seed, I think.
Oh, yeah.
The 2 seed at the very worst without Cooper. They're really good. They're NBA guys all over the place out there. So the Tar Heels deserve a hell of a lot of props for being in that situation. They just didn't close the deal, and they needed to close the deal.
No, yeah, I agree with you, man. Again, that wasn't me trying to take anything away from Carolina for that gets misconstrued in the comments or anything. It was more so what it felt like the vibe was in the second half with, again, just Duke taking their foot off a little bit and Carolina exploiting that fantastically. But let's move on to the last, obviously, sequence of the game. An instance where Hubert Davis did call a timeout. Carolina 1-point game, calls a timeout. Carolina comes out. Van Lubin gets fouled, has 2 shots to potentially take the lead late for Carolina, misses the first one, and then the lane violation occurs with Jalen Withers. I tweeted it right after it happened, man, or right after the game ended. I absolutely hate to see stuff like that. While the foul call was 100, while the call was 100% correct, I mentioned in my tweet that as someone who watches NBA basketball from time to time, I see stuff like that happen in the NBA. And I know this isn't NBA, but I've seen stuff like that happen all the time at the next level and not be called. So again, the right call in the moment, letter of the law, not disagreeing with that, but just an incredibly unfortunate situation. And, then Knuppel comes down, hits the free throws and, essentially ices it for the Blue Devils. But I hate it. I hate when stuff goes down like that. I hate it for the guys and individuals like that, especially a guy like Jay Withers who went through what he went through at the end of last season. Just, the worst possible person, in my opinion, that could happen to in that situation. But I'll say this before I kick it to you. There are a million other reasons North Carolina lost that basketball game than just that Jalen Withers moment. I know it's the one that people are going to talk about, and I know what social media looks like right now, but guys, this is a team that was behind 21 points at halftime and dug themselves a massive hole they had to come back from. You can't just sit here and blame the loss on Jay Witt, man. It's ridiculous.
I personally have thought for a long time. My dad refereed high school ball, and he actually refereed women's college basketball back in the day. And I've thought for a long time that when the shooting team has a lane violation, when they're shooting, and there's a lane violation, if it's a make, there's no violation.
Yeah.
Because there's no advantage to the shooter if his own player goes in the lane. The reason that rule's there is so the other team doesn't screw up the shooter by going in the lane. And the advantage would be if he missed it. Then if he misses it, you blow the whistle, then you call the violation, it's the other team's ball. Obviously, that's not the rule, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just giving my opinion what I think the rule should be. Jay Witt made a mistake. He owned up to it. He talked to us afterward. It was after Hubert's presser. Hubert and Jay Witt joined us in the hallway, a few of us, and arm in arm. And if you haven't watched it, I strongly urge that you do, because those of you who are pissed off at him and believe that your life was adversely affected by his lane violation tonight, you should watch that video. He's a wonderful dude. Unfortunately, he's only here 2 years. I really have enjoyed. I've gotten to get really comfortable, building that rapport with him this year. He's a wonderful guy. He's a college graduate. He plays as hard as you can play. Lord didn't bless him with the greatest hands in the world, and we see that sometimes. Sometimes he's a live wire. That's also what you like. Let's face it. They go to Syracuse. That live wire went off, and that changed the season. They are not here playing an important game tonight if it wasn't for Jay Witt just inserting a charge into this team, because they were dead after Clemson. And he lifted them up, and he kept it going. And you saw what he did the other day, and people were so happy. What a great story. Now they want to dump on him. You've either got nothing wrong in your life and have never experienced anything adverse to dump on him the way so many people are, or you're a miserable sap. And you feel like you have something to gain by dumping on this kid. Because the bottom line is, if that violation took place 10 minutes earlier, no one would even think about it. Because Drake missed a free throw. Or not just shortly before that. Drake missed a free throw. Okay? Everyone's all fawning all over Van Allen. Van Allen has 3 3-point attempts this season. 2 of them were tonight. One of them was an air ball. RJ missed the front end of a 1-and-1 earlier in the game. Seth, when he was asked about Jay Witt, he's like, guys, I missed 3 free throws. That's worth a lot more than 1 lane violation. The point is that this team made many mistakes, and every one of them, it's like if you add up a penny, if you have a room full of pennies and you start counting them over here, you're like, oh, they're just a bunch of pennies. But you start counting them one by one by one, somewhere down the road, unless you run out of pennies, you're going to have $1 million. Carolina made 1 million mistakes tonight. That's why they lost. Jay Witt's lane violation was just one of them. And it's magnified because of the shot last year. I had a conversation with him back in October and revisited conversation here in late February. Remember we talked about that, about how he read every social media post ripping him for the missed shot against Alabama. Not so much that he missed it, but that he took it. Who's their best three-point shooter this year? That's the kind of guy he is. So he screwed up. He made a mistake. It wasn't intentional. And he's not the only guy that made mistakes. You know, the second all-time leading scorer in Carolina history had 8 points tonight. I missed the front end of a one-on-one. So I'm not singling out RJ there. I'm just making a point. I think people need to lay off. You need to lay off. You need to lay off the guy. The call had to be made. I'll tell you what I thought. Now, in hindsight, you think, okay, these two things be evened out some. Because I haven't actually not seen the lane violation because I'm right behind the bench and I didn't see his feet there. I wasn't sure at first. I thought maybe Duke had one. But I'll watch the video. Everyone that's seen it said that it's absolutely had to be called. It was a violation. However, the foul that led to Lubin getting to the free throw line, I thought Malawash was going to get teed up.
Mm-hmm.
If that was 10 minutes earlier in the game, he would have gotten a technical foul.
Mm-hmm.
The ref showed restraint by not teeing him up. Sometimes refs might show restraint on a lane violation like that, especially if it's the shooting team and the shots made. They didn't, but again, I haven't seen that, so I can't really go any further on that aspect of it. But I thought that Duke was very fortunate Malawash didn't get a technical. I mean, he had players pulling him back.
Mm-hmm.
And he had two officials looking right at him. It was right in front of him. So lay off Jay Wash, guys. Jay Witt, excuse me. I think I've said Jay Wash a couple times.
We know what you meant.
Yeah, lay off Jalen Withers. He's a stand-up guy. Watch the video. Dude played his ass off. He just didn't have a great game and made a mistake. Leave it be. The reason this team is in the situation it's in is because all hands on deck had a hand in them being 22-13 and the most discussed, talked about team in the country right now because of the bubble.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it any better, man. I hate when stuff like that happens because of what ultimately ends up happening on social media and message boards and all that. So yeah, just lay off Jay Witt, man. There's bigger things in life. Just get off Twitter if you're thinking about abusing Jay Witt, and go walk around, read a book, do something else besides that. But I want to go back before we talk about the post game stuff and look ahead to NCAA tournament. I want to go back to one thing in the second half because I forgot to mention it earlier, but just to focus on again some more of the positives from this game, that second half run. It was Lubin, Cadeau, and Trimble that were behind it. I mean, they combined for 35 of Carolina's 47 second half points, 35 of 47. They were the reason Carolina got back into that game. And I don't think anybody was surprised with how Lubin's been playing recently. I think you could see that coming, but with two guys in particular, with Cadeau and Trimble, that has just struggled offensively in recent weeks, for them to kind of be the catalyst behind it, and a guy like RJ not be very involved. I think that's something worth highlighting real quick, because I thought those three guys in particular, AJ, were fantastic in the second half, and the reason Carolina was ultimately able to even put themselves in a situation where they could potentially hit 2 free throws and win the thing.
Yeah, I agree. And just as a heads up, there's about 3.5 minutes left. They're the under 4 timeout, the Clemson-Louisville game, and they're going to need this space here pretty soon. So we'll try to be quick. I agree with you. I thought that there were a lot of guys that they needed to play well, did play well, and stepped up. I thought Elliott was sensational tonight for most of the time. In fact, one of the reasons the rough spot hit was because Elliott was out of the game. Mm-hmm. And then he comes back in, picks up a third foul, and they were kind of screwed at that point. But he played very well. He was very alert. Those one-handed lobs, little scoop oops, have become a thing for him. He works on it, and I think it's a smart play because of his length, his lack of length in the lane against bigs. He's able to kind of be a little longer and out manipulate sometimes with that stuff. I love the energy that Seth Trimble played with. I love the hair on fire way he played with. I think that needs to be his game all the time. If it is, he's a guy that will play somewhere for pay for a long time. Lubin was really, really good. Lubin's work on the glass. Hey, how about this? He's the fifth Carolina player to ever have 3 straight double-doubles in an ACC tournament, joining Armando Bacot, John Henson, Mitch Kupchak, and Rusty Clark. So that's a hell of an accomplishment for a guy who closes the season very, very well. But I know we want to get to our last thing here in a second about NCAA stuff, but it's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Didn't want to forget those guys.
Yeah, they were big time. Yeah, just to move it on a little bit, and again, because we're a little short on time with the game almost ending, but NCAA tournament hopes, NCAA tournament chances for North Carolina. A lot of people are going to disagree. I think a lot of people won't too. I don't think it's a tournament team. Again, I think people are focusing a lot on the second half comeback, in which they should, but if you're going to focus on one half, you can't just skip the other one. You have to look at what happened in the first half. And I don't think that's going to make any, does have anything to do with the decision the NCAA, the committee makes, especially when you look at the fact that Carolina simply needed to win this game and they didn't do that, and puts himself again in a bad situation with just the sheer lack of Q1 wins. Because take away the net, I hate talking about it, but what does Q1 mean? It means essentially means good teams, if we're just talking about it at a very basic level. Carolina's record against them is simply not good enough, and they're the reason, because of this culmination of not being able to put together big wins when they had opportunities to. Again, they've only got themselves to blame for putting themselves in this position. So it depends who you ask. I think some people would still say maybe they're on the right side of the bubble. I've heard some people after the game say that Carolina is kind of, again, outside looking in now and need to see how the rest of these conference tournaments shake out. But as of right now, Friday at 11:55 p.m., what do you think? Is Carolina a legit tournament team, or do you think they're just probably going to miss out?
First of all, is it really 11:55?
Yeah.
Bless America. Quad 1 doesn't mean good teams. Arizona State's 13-19. If North Carolina played the Sun Devils on the road today, it would be a quad 1. North Carolina lost.
Mostly good teams.
Pittsburgh's won like 5 games since people unwrapped Christmas presents. All right. Since little Johnny unwrapped and got like a toy soldier or whatever back on the 25th, Jeff Capel's team's won like 5 or 6 games. And that's still a quad 1. I mean, there's so many flaws out there. Like the people that are pushing to expand this tournament, I think all these conference tournament games would be meaningless. Mm-hmm. Because teams, who would be fighting their way in? Would it be, St. Joe's and St. Bonaventure battling in the A10 for that 76th spot? I mean, it's absurd. We need to keep the tournament the size it is, and we need a new system. And the new system should count eyeballs. They need to include former coaches to watch these games closely, and you should weigh how a team evolves. Because college football or college basketball, they don't hand out national championship trophy in November or December. It's in early April. It's about a game where you evolve, get better and better as time goes on. And right now, the resume should not put this team in. If it's strictly by the resume, they shouldn't get in. 1-12, quad 1 shouldn't get you in. However, if the eye test matters and you've seen them play the last 5 weeks, they're absolutely one of the best 20 teams in college basketball right now. If they were to play everybody in America right now, there's about 7 or 8 teams that I would say that they have a very little chance of beating. But you get after about the top 7, 8, 9 teams, I think they would have a chance to beat those teams. And you get to the bottom of that top 20, I think those are teams they go 5-5 on with if they played 10 times. They have evolved into a pretty good basketball team. And they don't come back in this game unless they do. They outscored Duke 43-20. Last week, took a lot of crap from Duke fans because we talked about the 35-13 run. We were, as a team, as people who dissect this team and process everything that they go through, that was a sign of improvement. It validated some of that winning streak because they were able to do something like that against a great basketball team. So it's a gauge of Carolina's movement forward. Today we saw, they took, in the first half, they looked like all that was wrong the first 4 months of the season. But in the second half, they looked like all that was right since they went to Syracuse. And they closed it out that way. So the eye test, to me, if you're sitting in a room with a bunch of dudes that know ball, you're saying, yeah, that North Carolina, maybe not a 6 seed, but I can see them in an 8-9 game with Houston as the 1. That would make a lot of sense from a purely basketball standpoint. But we got this stupid-ass thing called the net with its quad crap, where Arizona State and Pittsburgh are quad 1 games. And let me give you an example. I know we got to go here in a second. So Boise State and Colorado and San Diego State played a game in the Mountain West Conference yesterday in their tournament. It was a barn burner for a while, and ended up Boise ended up winning by 10. San Diego State was 49 going into that game.
Mm-hmm.
So as a neutral site game, that would make it a quad one win for Boise State. But by beating them, they knocked San Diego State to 51, and it became a quad two win because they beat them. That's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world of stupidity if we're relying so heavily on the quad one thing. So the eye test says North Carolina should be in because you want the best basketball teams in America there. The resume and the whole season as a whole, if you're going to weigh the net crap, and if it's going to mean so much, they can't get in at 112. You can't get in at 112 in quad one games, especially when your AD is the head of the selection committee. It's going to look like favoritism. If they're the last team in, he's going to have to answer questions about them. And that's going to be hard for him to handle because he's not in the room when they talk about him. Bubba has no say-so. He can answer specific questions about when guys were injured or something like that. That's about it. He has no input at all on the discussion about North Carolina. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to wait and see. The players all say they're in. They're going to get together and watch on Sunday. And they're planning on playing. Seth Trimble said we're planning on playing basketball next week. RJ says we're an NCAA tournament team. I think they are from a pure basketball standpoint here on March 14th, now almost March 15th. I think they are. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean they're going to be in the field.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that, just to clarify what I'm saying, I don't think Carolina's a tournament team. I'm basing that off what we just spent a few minutes talking about of what the criteria from the selection committee is going to be. Because again, you can't look at a team like North Carolina, in my opinion at least, and put a 1-12 team, especially when you go back and look at some of the last teams in over the last few years. I mean, it would be, I think Carolina would have the worst quad one record since this whole thing started. And again, I think it's a stupid system. I agree with you on that. But if we're going by what the selection committee is going to go by, I can't sit here and look at that resume with the opportunities Carolina had and how some of those games went down too. I love how they've gotten better as the years, ended. I completely agree with that. But again, I just don't, it's hard. You're hard pressed to put a 1-12 team. And especially when at the end of the day, North Carolina only has itself to blame for not winning those games. They had opportunities to win some of these games too, AJ, and they just, for whatever reason, just struggled to finish big time at times.
Someone in that room is going to politic to keep them out because they're married to the net. So that's going to happen. But what they're also going to do is say, okay, because someone's going to say, hey, man, look at those close losses. Kansas, Michigan State, they had Florida, all that kind of stuff. And that guy's going to say 6 of those 12 losses were by 13 or more points. Mm-hmm. That guy's also going to say they were given a gift on a silver platter of Cooper Flagg being out. Oh, and Malik Brown, who shut down RJ the week before, being out, and he still couldn't beat him. They were given that gift, and they didn't take full advantage of it. That's what the guy who's going to vote no on North Carolina, that's what he's going to say. The guy that's going to vote yes is going to say, yeah, but they came back. And Duke's still a great team. Where would you see? We don't know if Cooper's going to be able to play in the opening round. Where are we going to see Duke? Is it going to change their seed line? No. Is it going to change their overall ranking 1 through 68? No. Okay, then why should we evaluate that game differently? Those conversations are going to happen about Carolina, and Bubba won't be in the room. He'll be out there texting people, probably nervous as hell. So that's what it's going to come down to, and the committee's either going to side with one guy or the other guy.
We'll see, man. We'll see on Sunday. I'm sure we'll do some kind of podcast on Sunday talking about whatever the heck ends up happening with North Carolina. Get involved in the comments below. Let us know if you think Carolina's is done enough this season to get in the field of 68. We want to hear from you guys. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. Let us know what you think about the game. Let us know what you thought about the second half comeback in particular. Make sure you like the video below too if you like the way Carolina came back and fought back in the second half in particular. Real quickly, head on over to Twitter. Give us a follow. Trying to get to 40,000 quickly. Also trying to get to 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. Click the subscribe button and the notification bell right now. We're also very, very close to 12,000 on Facebook. We're creeping our way up over there. So go over there and like that. All the links are in the description below. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Appreciate it, AJ. Our AC tournament coverage officially coming to a close, but a fun one nonetheless. I wonder how much time's left in that game. I'm just curious to know how much we have.
I just looked. I'm following it closely. 2:10 left. The Louisville's up 9. I just saw the Kentucky score. Kentucky is down 30 to Alabama.
Wow.
So Carolina fans, don't feel so bad because you know that insane Kentucky fan base is going to just be on fire tonight.
And on that note, we're going to get the heck out of here, man. That's Andrew Jones in it with a bang. I really appreciate that. I needed that at 12:01 a.m. I think that's going to get me through these next 30 minutes trying to get this video out. So, all right, AJ, I'll let you run, man. Appreciate it as always. We will see y'all next time. Thanks.